name's Lee Mather. I'm one of the game designers for F1 2013.
Have you got a question? Or were you involved with the classic concept as well? Yeah. Was it a big challenge, different to what you've done previously?
I think it's just the main challenge is the workload, scale. Each car's individual. I do the racing. So we've got a lot of the classic drivers coming in. A lot of all the new names, a lot of lines, a lot of them writing on the recording. And we're going to talk about handling side.
Yeah, from a handling perspective, it's essentially sort of a game and a half for us to develop this year with the classic cars. So we've obviously got very unique handling for all of them. We've got different engine types, different the turbocharged cars from the 80s. We've got the 3.5 litre, the V8 and V10 engines. It was quite a substantial amount of work to take on. But yeah, we really wanted to do them justice, and it was nice to be able to mix them up as well within the 80s and then to mix them up within the 90s to get such different handling characteristics, different audio, different visuals. And the tyres are all different. It's really worthwhile.
Yeah, they feel pretty different to what the modern cars do, especially with the turbo and stuff. So is that you're pretty much ready for next year with the turbos coming in as well? Is it going to be similar to that, I guess?
No idea what's happening next year.
One game at a time. That was a nice try though.
Do you have any idea about the pricing of how much the classics will cost and how much just F1 2013?
We know
Is there anything multiplayer-wise that you can discuss? Any changes, any number of people in the lobby? Or?
No, multiplayer is very much the same as it was in 2012. We've certainly moved a lot of the focus this year back from the multiplayer, which was the focus of last year's title, onto the career and in particular onto the classic stuff. So the multiplayer is obviously, we did consider increasing the number of cars online, but actually it turns out that there's not a huge number of people who ever fill an entire grid online, and the undertaking on the network side of things is quite vast to accommodate 22 real gamers in a Formula 1 game. There's a lot more data that goes between the consoles and F1 and say a first-person shooter.
Can you bring the classic cars onto multiplayer at all, or race format at all?
You can race the classic cars online, yes. The only thing you can't do with classics really is that obviously they don't take part in career mode, and you can't mix 80s and 90s, and you can't mix 80s, 90s and 13s.
Does the classic cars have damage at all? Don't see any damage in the time trial?
Yeah, damage is something that we haven't got with classic cars, mainly because during the mix of the eras, certain cars had completely single-piece bodies, although the majority of the front of the car was a single piece, so swapping the wing would be a completely different undertaking for one type of car than it would for one slightly later in the era. So we don't have quite as much damage as we do for the 13 cars where you can knock parts off your wing or you can carry on around everything being replaced.
Will you be adding more classic cars throughout the year with DLC content and stuff like that?
There's nothing planned at the moment.
We won't be revealing. There are more to reveal.
There are more to come?
Yeah, there's more to the classic mode to be revealed.
So, what do you think the best sort of improvement of the game was for this year? Overall, or can you sort of say that sort of thing?
I mean, obviously I always sort of enjoy the evolution of the handling on the game. Obviously that's always something that we do spend a lot of time on. The classics is obviously absolutely amazing. It's something that we've always wanted to do, and we finally had the opportunity to go ahead and do it. And I think we've really done it justice. It's going to pull in people who've loved the sport for years, and it's thoroughly enjoyable.
Will you be able to drive the new cars on the old tracks?
Yeah, we drive the modern cars on the classic tracks and the classic cars on the modern tracks.
I had a question, it's just escaped me. Oh no, this is embarrassing. It'll come back to me in a second. Someone bail me out.
Where do you start with building a classic car? Do you sort of use the base of the modern cars, or did you literally just go, right, start from 1 pixel, I guess.
Well, I mean, in terms of the physical modelling of the car team deal with that. They get a lot of reference material, all the way from the simple sort of Tamiya kit, all the way up to full-on photo reference that we get from museums or from visiting the factories, because a lot of factories obviously have museum pieces in their factories. Also, when capturing the audio, when we get somebody to run a car for us, the guys can go and take really in-depth reference photos. So we can always get pretty good reference from that point of view. And then in terms of the setup, we'll always start with just getting the stats as much as we can for the weight of the car, the dimensions, sort of try and get the rough idea of the weight distribution, and then build it from there. Engine power, engine torque. If you look hard enough and you really work, you can find things like the engine torque characteristics and the engine power curves, so you can really sort of mimic what was going on back then quite well.
So where do you get your data from, both the modern and the old cars? I mean, have you driven the modern simulators? And how do you know how it's supposed to feel, I guess? Because you're not doing it yourself, unfortunately.
The classics are a bit more subjective. You kind of watch the videos and you think that's the characteristics that you sort of see. So it's trying to get those to come across in the hand. Yeah. Whereas in the modern cars, we've had the opportunity to drive various simulators over the years, and we do have a good idea of how they should feel.
Is it pretty close then to what the Formula 1 simulators have got? What the current game? And it is. If not, what's different and what would you reckon?
I think the biggest misconception that we always find is that people think that Formula 1 cars are incredibly hard to drive. Now, I can't say whether they are or not in real life, but in a simulator, they're not as hard as you expect. I mean, you're going to be 10, 20 seconds off the pace of a Formula 1 driver. Just to suspend your belief that you can't take a corner at those speeds is incredibly difficult. But they're not hard to keep on the circuit.
My question's come back to me. Now that Pirelli have changed their tyres, have you changed tyre wear at all? Are blowouts more likely and things like that?
Well, we set the tyre wear up this year to be very similar to that in real season anyway, so there's the tyre wear is pretty similar to what you see in real life. Certain circuits you'll find more, certain circuits you'll find less. It'll suit different teams at different circuits. We've not done anything additional to get extra blowouts. That was obviously something that the sport didn't need that particular weekend.
Yeah. It's only quite frustrating. Mid-Silverstone all the time.
Is there scaling, tyre wear scaling?
Yes, tyre wear scaling's back in.
In real life, they have the mid-season test in Mugello. Do you have anything like that in the game, or is that still something you want to improve?
Yeah, I mean, the mid-season test in Mugello would be nice to do, but it's more resources required to get the circuit and so forth. And obviously we wanted to put a lot of effort into time and effort into the classic mode this year. So we've got the 4 new circuits in there, which is quite a large undertaking. Obviously we had long, 2010, so we were able to get the first run of the circuits and then refine them year on year. So the 4 new circuits was quite a large undertaking to make. So adding another circuit would be quite large.
So how does the actual career work at the moment? So you start the career, you just pick a team, is it similar to last year? Or?
Yeah, one of the changes we've made this year is the young driver test. Previously, you would obviously go on day 1 and you take part in both days, and then you'd be judged on how well you've done as to which tiers, which cars you could then drive with. What we've done this year is for players who played 2012, they don't necessarily have to take part in the first day of the young driver test, but you just go straight to the more advanced tests. Or of course you can choose not to and then just go in with a lower.
In terms of modern cars, how's the handling changed from 2012 to 2013? You presumably tweaked it some. What you tweaked and how much better is it?
I think we've actually increased the number of people working on the cars this year to try and allow us to really get a good spread of performance and balance it out nicely. So we've got, obviously the Red Bull has got great downforce, great stability, great performance. The Mercedes, super quick over 1 lap in particular, but its tyre wear is substantially worse than other teams. So we've really been able to balance what we've seen in the season. In terms of the handling, the cars, they're very similar to last year. I know some people didn't like the understeer feel last year, but that's very much what you do sort of get through a Formula 1 car. But we've balanced it so that I think we've taken on board the things that people liked in 10, 11 and 12, and it's given us a chance to pull it all together into
One more slight pointy question. Can you still auto-correct the car by jamming on the brakes? Or have you sort of I think that wasn't there in 2011 if I recall correctly, and I think it was there in 2010. It's been back in 2012. Sort of, I guess it's a sort of consequence of other stuff you do, I presume.
Yeah, it's strange. It's hard to comment on.
Yeah, it's a bit pointy ones, alright.
Yeah, it's an awkward one. It's a side effect of many, many things that trying to fix it would probably substantially break it's a physical byproduct of things which could actually happen in real life, but nobody would ever be in that situation to do it. And you do occasionally see it. I mean, there's an instance with Paul Dress. Might be Dress. No, Suited a couple of years ago.
Australia, the RF.
I don't know, there was definitely a point with Suited a few years ago where he spun it and he dabbed the brake mid-corner and the front of the car swung around. So it's very much the characteristics would be there if a driver was in that situation and didn't care for his own safety.
It's much more real than you think.
Yeah,
actually happy,
yeah, I mean, it's physically correct in what he does.
I was wondering if team orders come into play a bit more, like if you're like the second driver, would the team like come across if the team orders a bit more, so say if you're like the second driver and you're in front, will the team play with the radio and say do them faster?
We don't really touch on team orders because it's one of those elements that takes control away from the player, and then you could spend an entire career aiming for the winning spot and you're fighting against your teammate, and then all of a sudden the AI decides that they want your teammate to win the championship over you, and it just doesn't seem like the kind of element you want to simulate right now.
Yeah. I got the groceries, so. And
do you want to introduce yourself as well? Just
yeah, I'm Paul Gio, I'm the game director on the Formula 1 series.
Director then? What do you direct?
What sort of buds are you?
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, you know, my role from Codemasters really was, as soon as they signed the license, I'm a huge F1 fan. I watched every race since probably 1985, I think was my first year. Worked on Jeff Cramer's Grand Prix 3 and Grand Prix 2000 and a little bit of Grand Prix 4. Steve worked on Formula 1 2001, I think, on the Sony. So for us to kind of come into Codemasters and unite on the Formula 1 game, we had a really strong roadmap for what we wanted to do. Obviously in game development there are technical challenges, there are licensing challenges, in terms of trying to fit in everything that you want to fit in terms of trying not to put too much into one game and then you're trying to balance it all up. You know, I think if I was to reflect and look back, I think we did a fairly awesome job with 2010. You know, as a company we took a strong stance that we weren't going to release the game in 2009. We didn't think we could do it justice. There was a bit of back and forth on that, as you can imagine, a big hole in the company finances, but the decision was justified. You know, it was the biggest selling Formula 1 game of all time. We won a BAFTA, won loads of critically acclaimed awards. I think following up then with an annual franchise is a challenge. You know, you've only got a 9-month dev cycle when you take out the fact that Sony and Microsoft are looking after your games. There's only so much you can improve. There are certain changes in the sport, perhaps not enough year on year compared to other sports. Always things you're not happy with. I like to think of myself as a bit of a perfectionist, so when we don't, you know, when you've got to draw that line in the sand, that's the difficult part of game development for me, is to say, well, we're just going to have to go with that. You know, many falling out on that, as you can imagine. And I think finally here with F1 2013, certainly 2010 was big. The safety car and the multiplayer improvements for 2011 was just kind of getting there. The extra things with the YDT and the sort of jump in, jump out gameplay last year, but now finally with mid-race save and classic stuff is pretty much the first roadmap we did. What do we want an F1 game to be? This is it. We're here now. Still loads we want to do. You know, there are so many areas of the game that I think we can do more with. I don't want it to be too future focused, but you know, we've always got one eye on tomorrow, and that's not deliberately holding stuff back. I think one thing that we do very, very well at Codemasters is we only release something when it's ready, and Classics is a great example of that. It would have been I'll never say very easy actually, it would have been easier to license a car, perhaps not clear all the sponsors, and have a time trial version of classic content in Formula 1 game perhaps last year. Was that what we want to do, bearing in mind that other games have done that in the past and there are other games out there that do it? No, absolutely not. We want to innovate, we want to lead. There are numerous challenges, as you can imagine, with regards to signing off even the modern game content, but let alone trying to license stuff where ownership of teams has changed hands, where drivers have, seems like they've dropped off the face of the earth. They're obviously not part of the modern generation, so you know these drivers aren't someone who's going to log in and check their email every day. So there's huge waits in time when you're waiting to get people on board. So yeah, it's been a challenge. But
Is that a big part of your job then, all the licensing stuff and then?
Yeah. I guess in terms of here are all the features on the roadmap. Which ones can we technically do? Which ones can we group together that makes sense? How can we make sure that we're catering for people who are buying the games every year? And there's a chunk of people who that applies to. There are also some trends emerging where it's obvious that people are skipping a year, so they're only getting it every other year. And then obviously the total novice who, you know, to them KERS and DRS and Prime and Option is a completely different language, and so is trying to keep a Formula 1 car on the black stuff. You know, we always chase an authentic race experience, and you know, one thing that has been particularly cool, I guess, to chat to you guys is driving a Formula 1 car is not difficult. Certainly, you know, I've never driven the real thing, but I've been on 3 Formula 1 team simulators. Within 3 laps, I was 5-ish seconds off the lead driver's time, which isn't bad. Yeah, I didn't have the 40-degree heat. I didn't have all the overalls on. I wasn't necessarily twinking around with all the components on the wheel, but actually keeping the car on the track, and Lee will testify as well, isn't hugely difficult. Trying to do it all and gain that 5 seconds is hugely difficult. So, you know, when you talk about arcade simulation, this, that, and the other, there is a lot of misconceptions about that, about how hard it is to actually keep a car on the track. I think R-Factor is a classic example. You know, that is harder to drive than the 3 simulators I've been on. No doubt about it.
That's frustrating when a game feels like it's trying to just be hard to be sim, which isn't necessarily
exactly right.
true.
That's exactly right. So yeah, obviously we're privy to a lot more data than anyone else. We're privy to a lot more hands-on than anyone else. We're actually forging technical partnerships with specific teams, which is amazing. Can't reveal too much more than that. So we're comfortable with where our game sits. That's not to say we're not always going to try and move it a little bit further forward. But yeah, the sort of perception out there that you're fighting it, the car's on the edge all the time, but that's not it. 90% of driving the car on the track is okay. It's how do you get the 3 tenths that you need to bump the guy out and get in the next session, and then when you get all the toys, you know, when we first introduced KERS and DRS, you know, the drivers who kind of experience with racing games will go out, they'll learn the track on the primes, heavy fuel, then they'll introduce DRS, see how that works, they'll then introduce KERS, and then when they feel more confident, they get the track knowledge, they'll put on the primes and do a low fuel run, which is, you know, what everyone wants to know. Where do I sit? You know, how fast am I? Where am I on the grid? The guys who perhaps aren't quite so professional, and we've talked to and been on a GP2 simulator as well, and the guy sees a lot of them because it's a training simulator. And he said he can always tell the good ones from the bad, because the bad ones come in and go, what's the track record? You know, thinking that they're going to have a chance of blitzing it on their first ever go, which is obviously not the case. Whereas the clever drivers will take it steady. You know, you drive a lap at 80%, you're breaking into 200 metre boards, you're taking your line into your corner, you're thinking, well, you know, I stopped well in advance of that corner, so next time you know 175 or 150, 100, oh, that's too late, I'm over braking, and you learn the track and you build up your speed. So yeah, just trying to shape the direction of the game, trying to get the content signed off. Obviously arguing with what goes in and what stays out. But there are challenges, but the definitive thing for us is only putting stuff in when it's ready, and that's absolutely true of anything that we do. And you know, I know we're here specifically to talk about F1 2013, but everyone's obviously going to be thinking next gen, where's this, where's that? And you know, in 2008, like I said, we took that decision to not release a game in 2009, and we were massively rewarded for that in 2010. So it makes sense that if we're going to try and follow the same model, you know, we don't want it just to be a half step onto next gen. We want it to be another giant leap. There are easier to perhaps port and just upscale a few things, but perhaps there are whole systems which we want to totally rewrite now that we've got more power. The difficult bit of the job, I guess, whenever you get any new technology is there's all this new memory to play with and all this extra stuff, and the guys have spent it before you even get a chance to allocate your rounds, and then you've got to kind of take the call as to what you're going to spend your budget on. It's no surprise this year really in terms of the visuals. We spent more of the budget that we saved by HRT dropping off the grid. Obviously everyone wanted that memory straight away. To be able to record, or certainly try to record all the classic engine audios for the classic stuff. And in terms of improving our car models, I think in the replay cameras on our games and in terms of the logos, we weren't really cutting it. And I think from the presentation that you're not supposed to have seen, I think some of those images that speak for themselves really in terms of how close we can get into wishbones now, the cloth on wheels and gloves. We're really having an art director spend the focus where he wants to spend it, and also a fresh set of eyes to come in now that we're 3 projects in. What do we want to chase for this one and for the future is helping us master that. So that's kind of in a nutshell what do I do, I guess. Mostly on emails and playing the game.
Do you know if there's going to be a demo for this one?
There's not going to be a demo this year, no. It's always difficult decisions really. There are numerous reasons why you wouldn't want to do a demo, and I think from our point of view, it takes away dev time from something else. It always gets locked off earlier than the main game, so generally, I don't know about you guys, but it's very rare that you play a demo that then convinces you to buy a game. It's much more likely that you play a demo that convinces you not to buy a game that you weren't sure about. You get huge numbers of downloads for sure, but from my side, we do a good job of where we're trying to take F1 in terms of the simulation of the sport, in terms of making it more real. For me, the demo needs to address the other end of the spectrum when we're confident enough that there is enough assists to help novices. And when you go to any game show, it's not just our game. I was at E3 and I saw Forza 5, and what a stunning game that is. Massive fans of that franchise. But when you're watching gamers who have never driven Forza 5 before, they've obviously played the previous ones, but they're spinning off on every corner and they're crashing into barriers. And that's the videos that go on YouTube and that you guys see. And I remember the same show when we were looking at Gran Turismo 5. This guy is almost as if he was from a rival company. He could not make the game look any worse if he tried. He sits down, takes all the assists off, you think, oh, this guy's going to be good. It takes time to learn any handling model. So now, obviously it's always on the list year on year, but you think, what would people like? Would they like more content in their game? Would they like another feature? Would they like a demo? I know which one of those pools I sit into, particularly because we've done one last year as well. And that's not to say there's not enough improvements this year, because there are plenty. There's always challenging decisions to be made, and decisions get made that not everyone agrees with. And I think Steve does a fantastic job of trying to explain some tough decisions. When you see something from the outside, you can often think that that's the most ludicrous decision I've ever seen. But when you get exposure to the data that we pull from previous games, feedback from the forums, and don't get me wrong, we read every post, and we're hurt by the ones that are not so favourable, shall we say, but not just because they're necessarily worded in a particular way, but we want this to be this. We've got exactly the same desires as you guys have. We want this to be the franchise that people want to buy. Unfortunately, as a game, it doesn't do amazingly well in the States, which is a huge market for games. But we're going to be strong. We're not going to dumb this game down. That's not Formula 1. That's not what we want to do. And I won't say everyone can drive a car. I'll say most people can drive a car. Anyone who drives on the motorway long enough and sees middle lane helmets will testify. But driving a car is not difficult when it behaves predictably and it does the things you expect.
How do you deal with all the negative criticism that often surrounds your games? I think mostly unfairly. Do you just sort of take the rage out and bring constructive support? Do you ignore the ragers and just take on board the ones that are actually trying to help?
Luckily we've got Luke. Not only does he do a fantastic job at moderating, but there are some really there are some really fantastic tools now to see trends, to see keywords, to see various things. we tend to perhaps shy away from it for the first few days after launch. You want to read it because you want to know the stuff that needs addressing, you want to know the instant feedback, but when you pretty much lived in the office for the last 12 weeks, and then to hear any criticism is obviously difficult. And you know, some of the stuff you know is in there, and some of the stuff is a genuine surprise as well. You know, you must have known this is in there. That is not the case. You know, you've got a team of guys who are working on the game. You know, our team sizes range, 70, 80 guys. When the QA guys come on the end, you look at another 60 guys. But they're constantly playing through a particular program, and they play. It's very hard to start playing the game then in a different way. So you do see some stuff that you've not seen before. I was particularly pleased with the way that we patched the game last year, the way that we reacted to the feedback, how quick it was. It's obviously easier to patch via Steam. There are charges, I'm not going to say too much on camera, there are charges for console patches. I think Xbox are getting rid of them, and they're obviously turnaround time, so you need to make sure that everything's in there. So releasing things at the same time is difficult, and it's always going to upset people when someone's got something and someone else hasn't. But yeah, I mean, we read every post, we take a balanced view of what do we want to do with the franchise, and then saving enough stuff, which is the stuff that you guys are feeding back on. So, you know, mid-race save is something that we've always wanted to do, there's no doubt about it. You know, I enjoyed that back in Grand Prix 3, I enjoyed the hot seat, you know what I mean, I enjoyed various things in that game. When you're hearing people say, you know, rearview mirrors is another one, we knew that we had to try and take a step, but you need to sacrifice somewhere else, or try and grip to memory, so that's always the challenge. But when we hear people say they love Grand Prix mode and playing through a season as a licensed driver, it's not necessarily news to us, because we want that too, but it's slightly weird in the games industry that press people can record the first 50 minutes of your game uninterrupted. It's slightly weird, because if I went to watch Superman, I don't watch the first 15 minutes on YouTube and go, yeah, I will go and watch it after all. And it was immediately apparent that, you know, it took a bit too long to get into the game, you know? And that was why the decision was made, really. We wanted it to simplify the way to get into the game, and it was a bit clunky. The amount of events that I went to where people couldn't work the track select screen, they would select Melbourne 20 times, fill up that track select screen, and then continue. And you know, when you see that hundreds and hundreds of times, you're thinking, maybe we need a change here. So 2013 is the best of both worlds. We've got the ability to be able to jump into a single race quickly. We've also got the ability to be able to chain races together. You know, and multiplayer and various bits and pieces. So that's come back. Tyre scaling as well. I mean, the design decision was relatively sane. I mean, I have to say that I was on the fence side. I did want it back in as well. You know, that was my positioning on it. That if I've only got time to race a 25% race, I want to experience 2 or 3 stops, even if it meant every couple of laps. It's a bit weird. But Steve's decision was also very, very valid. That people are jumping in and experiencing 5-lap races, 25% lap races, 50% races. So having a bank of knowledge that an option tyre around this track can do so many laps helps you so much with the strategy and planning multiplayer races. So both arguments were equally valid. But such was the feedback on the forum. We looked at it. You know, we're not against reversing the decision. We think the approach wasn't the right one. It's obviously not done just, this will annoy everyone this year, let's remove out something that was there previously. You know, that's obviously not what we tried to do. We tried to build a game which is, there's compelling reasons why people would want to go out and buy the next year's game. Hopefully, well, you guys can tell me that hopefully this year is, even if you're not the person who would buy it year on year, there's enough stuff in here this year for you to perhaps buy it. And then obviously next year with the rule changes, the sport itself, which it hasn't done for the 3 years that we've had the license really. There was Schumacher coming back in 2011 and Curse and DRS coming in, which are great from the game features point of view. But, you know, really football games sell year on year because everyone gets football and everyone wants their star player in their star team. But the number of driver moves that have happened, for example, have been relatively low. So we need to innovate all the way across the board.
With the classic car, sorry, quick question. There's one name I didn't hear mentioned, Ayrton Senna. In his car, is that saying that's not going to happen, or is that perhaps in the future? Or?
Yeah, I mean, we never say never. So on the roadmap, we knew we always wanted to do classics. There was no secret in that when we were ready to do it. You go out and it's very, very easy to design a game once you know what toys are in the sandpit, you know. So there's obviously a number of concepts that you can begin to think up. You can replicate an entire season, you can replicate historic scenarios. Both of those situations require a very specific, you need to sign off this, or this doesn't come out. The complexity with licensing a team that's in this year's current World Championship, with all the sponsors that were in back in yesteryear, and getting two drivers who make sense to be driving that car, i.e. are still with us. There are some drivers who are obviously sadly no longer with us. Getting all those components is very hard, and then added to that, there are multiple teams on the grid now that are formed out of the ashes of other teams. So trying to find the person you need to speak to get it signed off by this date and have the confidence that you're going to do it is more challenging than we ever thought, to be honest. So we would like to see F1 Classics in all of our future F1 games. We think this is very much the beginning. In terms of, I think once the full team and driver lineup is unveiled, I think everyone will understand why we've chosen the route we have. There are double figures of licensed drivers, and a large, decent percentage of that is legendary names. And fans of the sport love cars, of course they do, but you resonate with a particular driver. Mansell was my childhood hero until he retired, and then Schumacher was doing something different, and then I can imagine that people who started watching the sport in 2000s thought that Schumacher was boring, just like people think that Vettel is now. Some people like Lewis. Lewis to me is another version of Mansell. He doesn't like managing tyres or fuel perhaps so much. It's all about, let me rag this car and I'll either get a podium or a race win, or I'll be nowhere, and that's very much in the ilk of Mansell. So I would never say never to anything. The further back you go, the harder it is. There were multiple drivers in the eras that we were looking at who sadly aren't with us anymore. There were extra licensing complications in terms of Senna in particular. The Brazilian PC game has got his exclusive rights. And you have to have a cut-off date in the sand when you lock down the content. So hopefully in the future, and again I think if you're looking at the scenarios, Senna would fit into a recreation of a season or a recreation of a moment, as opposed to let's just celebrate an era and have all these drivers racing against each other. The concept.
Can you reveal if it will be on Xbox One and PS4?
This game won't. No. Again, we didn't want to onto another system.
It wasn't ready, as you said.
Yeah, I mean there are design reasons, there are technical reasons. As a company, obviously we're looking at next gen. A company of the Codemasters size, you'd be surprised that we weren't looking at every avenue, but there's a significant amount of technology work that has to be done just to get a car on a track running around next gen consoles. I mean that's how far back it goes. And then there's the which bits do you want to take across? Which bits are you confident in that's stable enough and that you couldn't do better? You've got physics, you've got AI, you've got weather, you've got damage, you've got all these different components. There's quite a strong lead time in terms of what you want to do. And like I said, we don't want to just stick a game out there, difficult as it would have been for the console's launch title. You're going up against something like Forza, who they're exclusive to one platform, so it's easier to tailor the experience to one console. The extra complexities about making things across 3 different platforms is huge. And we want to come out with a bang again. We want to do something that's cool. We don't want to just be like we're not a AAA player. So
I guess it depends how much you look into it, but would you have to more or less start from scratch for next gen, or would you be able to carry some stuff over? I know you've got an engine that currently works on still the current platform, but is that...
Both, to be honest. There's large chunks we are actively rewriting. There are specific, in games there are TCRs and TRCs, certain requirements, basically MOTs that Sony or Microsoft require you to do certain things. And there are a number of different things, features that they want you to promote on next gen. There are a number of different online things you have to do, loading restrictions on various bits and pieces. So the technical challenge isn't just coming over those things. In addition to then uplifting your game. You know, so from a car perspective, for example. So we're still not sure whether you would take an existing car model or you would scratch it again and rebuild it all for next gen, just because there's so much more horsepower. You know, you don't want to limit yourself too early on. So obviously, the more that you've got to take back to basics, the longer your lead-up time needs to be. So have the confidence in us that we will do it when the time's right and when we're ready. You know, we'll be absolutely confident about that. We're not hiding behind anything. We're not shy about anything. We're not scared by future technology. In fact, we're massively excited about it. You know, when you've been working on a generation of consoles for so long, it's great to be able to see wins like 2010, 2011, 2012. You can start to pick some relatively easy wins game on game, but as you get nearer to the console's end life, it's much more hard to find those wins. We're lucky this year we've had Ant, who's been our art director, and he's really helped to streamline and focus on the areas we should be focusing on. But next gen's a whole new beast, and personally, from my point of view, I'd want the physics to be moved on a significant amount, I want the AI to be moved on a significant amount, I want the graphics to be moved on a significant amount.
So obviously the engineer you used, I think it's the Ego engineer.
Yeah.
That was obviously, I think, built before you knew you had the F1 license, so that was not really built privately. Would you want to, I guess building your engine is probably a huge thing, but or re-engineer it? I think you've already modified it quite a bit to just...
Yeah, we've had multiple iterations of Ego, so Ego 1, I think, it goes back as far as the Tokens and stuff, and there are various bits that well, not quite back to that date that still exists, but there are various bits in various different eras where the person who wrote it is no longer there, so it's very difficult to understand it and not get any programmer who works on any software, whether it's games or anything, they want to rewrite it because they're convinced they can do it better. That's just development for you. But yeah, I mean, there's a significant amount of technology work I would say to bring it forward. So I'm not exactly sure. You know, the roadmap of the company going forward is we are looking at it. We've got our central tech department. All the studios are wanting to share technology so we can build up and learn from other games and invest back into it. But it takes takes so much time. I mean, you can't even begin it. Like I said, the planning for classic content came years ago. It seems to have been so long, and you know, obviously the next gen consoles we were aware that they were coming this year for a while. There's a lot of planning that needs to be done, kind of like a house move, I guess, to the other part of the world. You need to get everything down and be confident. There's no way that you can kind of, you know, we could have promised to deliver a next gen version this year and then go, no, actually we can't do it. You know, you need to, once you've set your marker in the sand.
It's a similar thing for everyone's 2010, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's easier from our side because we've got the confidence in the team. It's the same team that build on it year on year. So, well, from an internal point of view, there's a lot of tired guys, and you know, they're crunching year on year. There's a lot, you know, they know the technology inside out, and we're confident because we made a success in 2010. It was a difficult decision in time not to do PS3, Xbox 360, PC in 2009, but the decision was fully justified. So everyone in the company has got the confidence in us that next gen will come when we're ready.
Just one thing if I can. You mentioned GP2, a bit of a pointy question. Is that on your roadmap for future? Would you like it? Is it going to happen?
I meant GP2 was in the Jeff Crammond game, but
no, but wait for that.
I would love to see it, yeah. I mean, when you look at the route into Formula 1, I think it's quite convoluted. There's the F series, there's the GP series. When you look at GP3, it's like 8 or 10 races of the European season. GP2 expands on that a little bit more, it goes to Singapore and starts slightly earlier. So as a concept, building up from a rookie, going through junior formulas into the game, as a gamer, would I want that 100%? But you're talking about licensing another franchise in an existing licensed product. Would we like to do it? Yes, absolutely. Is it something that we're going to be able to do anytime soon? I don't think so. You could do a separate box product, but then how many guys are going to download the GP2? It's a challenge because each series is owned by so many people.
Yeah, I know MotoGP did, but I think they're all licensed by the same presumably one license. I think obviously it's not F2 anymore.
Yeah, the thing with
it's different people together.
Yeah, the thing with Formula 1, I think the big thing that, you know, that I guess not a lot of people get to see is in a game like Football Manager, you can transfer whatever players you want. You know, you can get Lionel Messi to go play for your team. In Formula One, it's impossible really, because the sponsors pay so much money for the branding on the drivers' helmets and overalls, etc. They don't want to see these drivers in other cars as much as we all want to see it. You know, when you're talking how much money is in Formula One, you know, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of pounds, that it makes things like cross series and driver moves to other teams different. Would I love to do it in the future? Absolutely. Like I said, would love to do it.
Well, those are questions on. I know we've been here quite a while.
You all good?
All good?
Cool. Thanks for your time.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Cheers.